Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hi. All right, this is on, right?
Test.
Test. All right, so I'll just start by asking you guys, since you're the experts, why do we need DeFi? We're at the DeFi stage. Can you guys just, why? What is it and why?
I don't think we need DeFi. I think it's just a new way to capture the idea, just a new phrase. Like it's just a way to express what we try to achieve. It's a very abstract concept, but it's not inevitable that it will happen. So I'm not sure that it's something that could actually be a specific need.
From my standpoint, I think the current financial services industry and finance generally is very opaque and has a lot of that opacity baked into it. And we saw in 2008, we've seen recently with subprime auto loans, there's a lot of risk associated with an opaque industry that controls a lot of the economy, if not is the economy. So I think DeFi brings an openness, a necessary openness to finance that I think for the first time allows for some of these structural risks to be addressed in an enduring fashion.
Yeah, I think on top of openness, opportunity as well. Regardless of where you live, you should have access to financial services. So I think that's why we need DeFi.
All right, do you guys want to tell us now a little bit about each of your companies, kind of in a row, where you work, what you do?
Okay. So I work for Truffle Suite. We make developer tools. So we have a suite of tools. We have Ganache, Drizzle, and Truffle, of course. Truffle is a command line interface, an asset pipeline. Ganache is essentially your private blockchain that allows you to set up a blockchain on your computer without a consensus protocol, and you can test your smart contracts without the risk of losing any of your ether. And then Drizzle is a set of front-end libraries. We essentially have ported the libraries from Web 2 and then made them into Web 3 libraries. We also have a brand new product that launched earlier this year called Truffle Teams, which is zero config smart contract CI.
I love Truffle Teams. Alethio, we're part of Consensus. We do Ethereum data visualization and analytics. DeFi is interesting for us because it's a subset of our focus. We have a whole sub area focused on DeFi applications, protocols, visualizing activity, providing interfaces for usage and understanding.
I'm from Fuse.io, and we're building a platform for entrepreneurs that have no technical knowledge and want to launch pretty complicated fintech products that require a lot of licensing. So we want to lower their cost and give them a non-custodial self-service platform to just launch their services.
So you just mentioned FinTech. Could someone explain the difference between FinTech and DeFi as terms?
I can take a first step at this. From my standpoint, FinTech largely has focused on facilitating access to the current financial system, providing tools and better access points. Decentralized finance is really a reworking of that system and allowing for a much more transparent means of access. So they're profoundly different. You could argue that DeFi is a subset of FinTech, but largely it's a different paradigm from my standpoint.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what Christian says. He took my answer, actually. We talked about it earlier. Just kidding, he didn't.
Yeah, well, and I hope the end game that we will not have fintech and only like everything will be fintech. So it's a difficult question because it's two abstract terms.
So what's the current state of the DeFi space then? If you could talk about it both abstractly but also concretely in terms of the use cases that are out there, the protocols that are out there.
I think it's depending on what we agree as DeFi. So I look at DeFi as a group of companies trying to build new business models for fintech on top of Ethereum and using each other's codes. And basically, it's a new playbook. So you're basically redefining how collaboration and partnerships work in that context, and you redefine how you need to be licensed and redefine how to do a lot of stuff. So it's a really new playbook to launch those services. And that's for me is DeFi.
For me, I mean, the potential is really exciting. Right now, we're very much in the testing phase. You have different financial products that are architected to be more open or accessible, whether it's loans or things like that. You largely have an insular community kind of testing these among themselves, but as soon as this phase proceeds and you actually apply it to things like student loans or auto loans, or some of the areas of the economy that are actually struggling, I think we're going to see pretty widespread adoption, because at the end of the day, it's not blockchain first. It's you have access to a better loan at a faster at a lower fee, better rate. It's really just a better product than what's currently offered in many of these areas. So I'm excited about the next phase where it actually becomes more mainstream.
And I also think that usually when you come to a regulator and say this could improve competition, they usually fall for it. So it's also not scaring, I think, regulators as much, because a lot of them realized that they basically closed the door for any kind of small player in fintech, especially in America. And only the big players, if you buy Bitcoin, you usually do it from like $2 or $3 billion companies. So regulation is definitely, I think, in that case, like a good force.
So do you guys agree with that, regulation being a good force in this space?
Wholeheartedly. I mean, I think informed regulation is necessary for this. I think it's a lot of what would be required to be regulated in current finance is baked into the protocol, but some elements around governance, I think, should be informed by regulation. And you're always going to have a degree of a segment that is made up of bad actors. So I think being able to protect the newer user base from that segment is important. Regulation can play a role in helping that.
Yeah, and to Christian's earlier point about we're really working with an insular community right now. I think more regulation can bring more adoption because it's not as scary to people who aren't in our space right now if we are able to have more regulation in the space.
The thing I like the most is the fact that regulators read contracts, so that this would be like a real breakthrough when regulators tap into the code and figuring out if the code is written like that, then you need a money transmitter license. If the code written like that, maybe you need to go to jail. So they actually like SEC like released, okay, the DAO was security because we read the contract. So I think it's amazing.
So I'm going to steal some of the questions that were just talked about during Vitalik's talk over there. So the interviewer asked him if they think right now in the DeFi space there's a lot of reliance on very few protocols. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
So, I mean, objectively, yes, but the reality is, these protocols allow for a diverse array of applications to be built on top of them. So it's not as straightforward as saying you have two or so main underlying protocols in DeFi. The reality is it allows for a range of variation. And I think I wouldn't associate a small number of underlying protocols as one-to-one with higher risk necessarily. I mean, we're still early and we're evolving, but I don't see it as necessarily a bad thing at this stage.
I'm also not sure what it means because a lot of the stuff that, for instance, my company is not developing everything from scratch. Not all of it is necessarily protocols. You have a lot of open source code you can use, and just the fact that there's an ecosystem of like wallets, explorers, APIs, and endless, like pretty much any vertical in crypto has like a bunch of open source options. So I think that's unique to blockchain and crypto. So it's not necessarily the protocols.
One thing I'll just add, I mean, it's exciting because in DeFi we're seeing teams actually using available component parts that other teams have built. I think the narrative to date in tech has been we're going to build it all ourselves, and it's been less of a collaborative approach. But in DeFi, you have the protocol layer, then you have applications, then you have wallets, you have other data products, and it's really about picking which component part makes the most sense for your business, offloading development of these services and tools, and then focusing on your core value proposition. I think that's allowed for the space to evolve over the course of just 6 months or 8 months from when it really picked up.
So what do you see as the current challenges for adoption of more DeFi-based protocols and open source and projects?
From my standpoint, it's still daunting. I think the interfaces are coming out and they're improving, but it's challenging. I mean, unless you are very familiar with what the applications offer and what the space is providing, it's very challenging, I think, to access some of this information for a non-Ethereum user. We're getting there. It's getting better, but for mainstream adoption, the UX has to be 10 times better, or the rates have to be 10 times. You have to have a market improvement over the current state, because so much of the externalities of current finance is blocked by other industries like fraud and other insurance products that the consumer really just sees the convenience of that application. So until we get to this interface that is truly better or easier than what they currently have, we're not going to really see larger adoption. I mean, I'd love to say the mantra will drive adoption, decentralization, remove risk, but that doesn't go. It only goes so far for the casual consumer that just wants a better product. I think that's the challenge right now we're facing.
Well, I think, first of all, if you put a little perspective and look at before 2017, before the ICO boom, this space was completely different. So if you look at the progress in the last 3-4 years, you can really see like not really a linear improvement, where it's really an exponential improvement, but still there's not enough critical mass. And I think the magical moment for crypto will be when people will not know it's crypto. So it will be hidden. It will look like Visa, like Venmo, maybe even better. This is, I think, also about e-commerce. You will not have e-commerce and commerce. You will have only e-commerce. So the same goes for dApps. Nobody wants to use a dApp. They want to use something that looks familiar, that's it. So I think we're not there yet because it's really open source code is a long-term investment. For Linux, it was much more useful for developers than for consumers. It took decades to reach like consumer friendliness that basically hid Linux under layers of code. And same goes for crypto in general. Bankers need a good way to transfer assets. Like it's not unique to Bitcoiners. So anybody with money needs a really fun and good way to transfer it, whether you work at a bank or not. So that's what I think will happen.
Yeah, and I think once we get to a better user experience, then we're going to be able to gain that adoption, as you've said. And I think, have you ever tried to explain to your parents how this works? It's nearly impossible. Well, not nearly impossible. I mean, my parents can barely use a computer. So it will be, like you said, Mark, it'll be like Visa. It'll be completely accessible to everyone. And I think both of your companies are doing work to get us there, right? Like you're being really modest. What the work that Alethio is doing with your data dashboards is making information that was previously unusable to the average user actually something that's consumable.
Yeah, I mean, DeFi for us is a really interesting use case because it's actually showing traction on chain and being able to visualize relatively meaningful interactions, whether it's opening a CDP or providing liquidity. It's an interesting on-chain action or behavior, and being able to visualize that and make the meaning behind that kind of resonate via either a dashboard or a chart or interactive interface. But like Mark said, when we're trying to create a series of data products that live behind the scenes, that really just accelerate the development of these tools, from our standpoint, we're a component part for a lot of these applications.
So what are the things you think are missing in the space right now? Things that you wish were there?
Privacy.
Elaborate on that.
So right now, everything is public. Everything is transparent, and then you start to have problems like if you want to close all, if you want it fully private, the blockchain can't work. So you need to find like really the balance between public and private. I think that finding this balance is more a game of trial and error and picking the best solution, because it got to do a lot. Privacy has to do a lot with scalability. So we don't want to have like the fastest blockchain that is not private. We don't want the most private blockchain that is the slowest. And I think that trying to compete with Visa on TPS while the privacy problem is not solved is kind of trying to tackle their own goal. So blockchain makes sense if it's completely outperforms Visa in a totally different ballgame, like a different use case, different tech stack, and different ease of integration. And privacy has to be one of the things that needs to be solved there. And there's so many options right now. So I wouldn't say like there's no solution. There's like a lot of a lot of options. We need to have enough critical mass to know what works best. We're not there yet on the privacy front.
I fully agree. I also think part of the exercise to date feels like finance for the sake of finance. I think there are real world applications that we should be focusing on and targeting, whether it's directly addressing unbanked segments of the population, student loans, for example. There are these borderline crisis areas that I think could be a really good anchor, mainstream anchor for decentralized finance. And I think using those as that route for adoption is a really powerful approach. And I think, Facebook's going to be talking later. They're taking that approach in India, I think. So I think there's a way we could, instead of focusing on lending to ourselves and testing these products as loans to ourselves, anchor them in an actual real world issue that these address in the near term. I mean, we're on the cusp of another recession, basically. It's just kind of silly to me that there aren't more applications focused on these kinds of things.
By the way, this is the perfect storm for DeFi, the recession that will come upon us soon. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see, something to address student loans. In the States, there's trillions of dollars in student loan debt that is probably going to be defaulted on. We're going to have another 2008 crisis, but it'll be something different this time. So would love to see real world applications around that. And mortgages as well. I'm in the process of buying a house right now. As if anyone has, it's kind of ridiculous. It would be so much easier if we were able to have a use case around that.
I think also before loans, cash is disappearing. So there's a very strong consumer demand to move to mobile payments, even in places that are low tech, and you wouldn't believe that people have cell phones. People start to have cell phones, and once you give them the ability to buy through the phone, the plastic makes less sense. So I think that would be a strong force. Pretty much for any fintech company, not only for crypto.
So we've talked a lot about like the future cases, the things that are standing in the way, the things that you guys want to see. But can you guys just get like really specific about like the actual use cases that exist right now? Like what each, maybe even not your own companies, but just like what exists, what can like people download, what people use like on the day-to-day basis today?
I mean, I think the most popular one would be MakerDAO. I mean, I know that that's one that I use personally. And you're able to have a stable currency regardless of where you are in the world. It goes back to earlier talking about opportunity. For me, that's the most common. I'm sure there's more, though.
I think one of the most impressive examples. The problem with DeFi is everything in DeFi looks like it's been built on the way to a hackathon. So it's not consumer products, but if you're asking for something that actually works and tested, there's a really interesting project called the Burner Wallet, where they do onboarding to conferences like this and give out food using a Burner Wallet that you actually like pay with a crypto token, and they can actually prove at the end of the day how much transaction they paid and how much would they pay to Square, Stripe, or PayPal or something like that. So you can actually show how you lower cost, you show how you onboard, you show how you remove friction. The problem is like it's very ad hoc. It's like gone after the conference is finished. So we're trying to think about expanding those ideas. So you remove the middleman from the transaction. What can you do? Which is interesting, especially invoice financing, which is also about lending, but in a very different setting with very different types of information and very different people that loan and very different data architecture. And suddenly you see that this is capable of doing stuff that don't exist. So it's hard to start. We really need to do a lot of experimentation. So all I'm saying is pretty much all of the activity is experimenting.
Yeah, I mean, just with Burner, it's the first example that really felt like this is an easy onboarding experience. The benefits are clear, and the overall environment, the event-based payments network, it's really compelling. So I agree with Burner. Also, I think just taking a step back, a big issue in the States is carried wealth. So you have a lot of unactivated capital, unactivated assets that are just kind of sitting and carried over generation to generation. I think DeFi provides an opportunity to activate capital and invest in certain things, initiatives, areas in a way that currently wasn't available. and hopefully that'll unlock some of this just kind of stagnant portions of the economy that are really just there and not doing anything. So I'm encouraged by these easier ways to issue loans or provide liquidity around different projects. So I think that's a bit further out, but those are one of the things that I think we're seeing early traction on today.
And quick side note, I think that there's burner wallets here. Is there anyone from the Ethereal team that can confirm?
There
No,
is. I can
there is?
confirm because
Okay.
we have we're visualizing they're doing a Helena prediction market based on a number of questions using XDAI and burner wallets. And if you come over to our booth, we have a XDAI dashboard set up around real-time tracking of what's happening at the event, which is really cool. I mean, working with Austin on Burner, the last event, and being able to kind of see the code base, it's really the experience is pretty easy. It's just it's a great thing, I think. Dog fooding is really great, and we should do more of it in this space.
My last question is about like any features you guys have for the future coming down the pipeline, like new things you're working on.
Yeah, so from our standpoint, we're building a DeFi data product, which is really exciting because as amazing as it's been to see DeFi emerge, DeFi smart contracts are architected very differently across the space, so it's very challenging for relatively casual users to get a sense of what's actually happening between protocols, between applications. So what this product will do is provide either an interface or a series of endpoints that allow you to directly access collectively activity in the space. So easily able to parse smart contract events, account histories across different protocols. I think we're moving towards a standard-based approach to developing these platforms, but until we get there, you're going to have this disparity between how platforms are created and how you can actually access them.
So I mentioned this earlier. Truffle is working on a new product called Truffle Teams. We are in beta right now, and it is zero config CI for smart contracts. So if you think about when you deploy your smart contract, it kind of goes out to the ether, no pun intended, and you don't know what's happening with it. So what Truffle Teams does is allow you to monitor your smart contract and see the status of it, and it's all going to, in the future state, be in a nice clean dashboard so you can see exactly what's happening. Like I said, we are in beta right now, so you can try it out at trufflesuite.com/teams.
So Fuse trying to really focus on the entrepreneur with no technical knowledge that just want to reach customers fast as he can and only do the footwork, not invest in any development cost, licensing, custody. So basically separate the KYC out of your business, separate the money in, money out, use the DeFi ecosystem, don't write your own contracts, basically let those entrepreneurs define their community using a contract on the blockchain and really give them the ability to add features to it, so without being a Solidity developer. I want my new users to get 10 coins bonus, or want this to be tradable in that place, or want so the functionality is endless. The idea is to give them those building blocks in a self-service, like no code interface. So that's our release. That's our plan.
Thank you, guys. We have 1 minute left if anyone has questions. I'll repeat that. So since blockchain is new, are you guys experiencing a lack of talent in this space, or are you finding that people do have what you need?
I think that before, I can see in Israel, I'm in this space since 2014. Only in 2017 we had 10x on the amount of people that are in this space. So they need to train people from zero. So it's not like you have too many people that were around in 2013 or 2012 or 2011. I think in Israel there's no more than 100 people before 2014. I'm sure a lot of countries it's a very small. So I don't see any. My experience is there's enough talent, not in crypto. You can bring it to crypto.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think there's going to be a coming need to scale rapidly, and I think that's where we're going to run into some challenges. Scaling high quality talent in this space, developing a way to train and develop these individuals to bring them over from a previous background is going to be a bumpy road, I think.
All right, thank you, guys.